The shed was the only structure to withstand the fire. The Davidsons' house had caught fire, and the blazes reached the other surrounding houses, burning them down as well. The entire event happened overnight. The blaring sounds of the fire trucks and screaming woke me up. Slowly, neighbors stirred awake and came to their front porches to watch as the firefighters battled the fire. Mr. Davidson sat on the back of an ambulance with an oxygen mask covering his face. 2 police officers questioned him, then eventually took him away. As I look back on it, he wasn't distraught or emotional. We later learned that Mrs. Davidson and their 2 children, Andrew and Alan, were found dead the next day in the lower level of the house. I never really knew them. They had only moved into the neighborhood less than a year before the fire took their house. They kept to themselves, quiet, typical middle-class yuppie-like people, well-dressed, nice car, a caddy. They seemed normal to me. Rumors started to fly around that there was foul play involved. My father seemed to think that they were about to lose the house, so he burnt it down in order to collect the insurance money. I hadn't seen Mr. Davidson, or anyone for that matter, come by the house in weeks. Then, we learned that Mr. Davidson was indeed arrested, but it wasn't for insurance fraud. It was for the murder of his family. More time had gone by. The burnt shell of the Davidson house was beginning to crumble. My parents had called the city multiple times to have the house torn down. It was a real eyesore, to say the least. But as the house slowly deteriorated more and more, the shed still stood there as a reminder that the living once belonged there. Stories were told of screams coming from the house at night. Some said that they could see shadows pass by the broken glass windows. My friend said that he even saw someone come from the shed one night. I had always wondered about the shed. It was a simple wooden shed. The previous owners, the Furmans, before they had passed away in an auto accident, had built it. I was there when they laid the cement foundation. Mr. Furman was a weak and frail man. My father and I helped before he eventually hired a contractor to finish the work. Why would it have survived that huge fire as the house burnt around it? I thought I would never know. One night, while my parents were out of town, I decided to check out the interior of the shed. There was a lock holding the doors closed. I used my dad's bolt cutters and cut my way through the lock. The door popped open. I slowly pulled the door open wider. The hinges creaked from the rust that had formed. In the silent night, I thought for sure that someone would hear me. I quickly entered the shed, but immediately froze as I saw what was in there. The beam of the flashlight didn't reveal what I had expected. There was no lawn equipment or gardening tools. There was no extra patio chairs or water hoses. The small shed was decorated with pentagrams and statues of demons. There was a small makeshift altar with half-melted candles. Beneath the altar was a Ouija board and a pad of paper. There was a shaky, handwritten message scribbled on the top piece of paper. It read, "Burn them all." Burn them all? My body went cold. The hairs stood on end. My face felt flush. I couldn't breathe. Suddenly, it seemed like all of the statues were staring at me. There was a voice, not one anyone else around could hear, but one that I could only hear inside of the shed. "Burn them," it repeated. "Burn them." I backed away from the altar and turned to leave the shed. Pinned to the wall beside the door was a photo of a man. I knew this man. He was thin with a long face. His beady eyes appeared black. His smile curled ever so slightly in the corners of his mouth, revealing his crooked teeth. It was Mr. Furman. He was wearing a black cloak and held a chain in his long, thin fingers. He looked like a priest of some sort. He was here, in this shed, at this altar, his altar. I staggered home. I was alone and afraid. The voice of Mr. Furman echoed through my mind the entire night. I couldn't sleep. I heard the screams coming from the house. I parted the blinds in my room to see the shell of the house. Something moved in the upstairs window. Something was in the house. Did Mr. Furman cause Mr. Davidson to burn down the house? Was his family sacrificed in some way? This intense anger came over me. Furman's voice was louder. The screams were louder. I wanted it all to stop. When my parents arrived at home the following day, I tried to avoid them. I was too on edge to deal with them and the details of their long weekend away. But they kept asking me questions. What happened? Where did you go? Did you see anyone? Burn them. What's wrong? Burn them. Is everything all right? I wanted it to stop. Everything. Everyone. I heard the voices enough that I wanted to do what it was telling me. I was only in that shed for a moment, and it had rattled me this much. What was happening to the Davidsons the entire time they were at the house? It became too intense for me. I had to do something. I found the gas tank for the lawnmower in our garage and emptied the contents of it. There was a feeling of relief for only a moment. Now, my father is about to fire up the grill. I just hope that he doesn't char my hamburger. And oddly, I don't feel any emotion as I wait.